Please welcome to the stage the Master of Ceremonies, Gustavo Allegret.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. It was great, right? You missed my poll question before, and I really miss you answering those important questions for our internal conversations. But anyway, let's move on. You know, one of the most relevant challenges that journalists have today is sitting on the same table, people from different point of views, in a polarized era in which everyone thinks that they are right and the others are wrong. And polarization is not helping to reaching agreements. This panel has special relevance today. It's called A Call of Unity. And our esteemed panel and moderator will discuss the importance of an agreed sense of unity to create a space for productive conversation in this particular tough time, in this particular area of polarization. So please pay attention and welcome Hagar and Chemali and our esteemed panel. Thank you.
You all. I'm very excited for this conversation. To introduce myself a little bit, my name is Hagar Chemali. I'm the host and creator of a show on YouTube called Oh My World, where I explain geopolitics in an educational and entertaining and satirical way, which means I'm often dressed with a wig and in a bad accent. And I'm especially excited for the panel today because my government background actually was as a civil servant. So I believe deeply in bipartisanship. I worked under Bush and Obama, and it's a very unique year. Our election season has been not normal, to say the least. Show of hands of anybody who thinks it's gone smoothly. Okay, nobody. And the symptom of the problem are these deep political divides. And it feels as though they're intractable at the same time. It feels as though the media, is playing on that. And it's hard to see how we get out of it a little bit. Our adversaries are taking advantage of that as well. But we know that unity is the response and the solution and the only way for our citizens and our leaders to get the solutions we need for the problems we face on a daily basis. So hopefully this panel will talk about those potential solutions and whether it's going to get better or, you know, maybe it gets worse before it gets better. So I want to introduce my panel. I have next to me General Wesley Clark. Yes, I agree. He's the founder of Renew America Together. Next, I have also Jon Gable, who's the CEO and co-founder of All Sides Technologies. Next to him, I have Anna Rold, who's the founder and CEO of Diplomatic Courier. And then there on my other side is Jon Clifton, CEO of Gallup. Thank you. So, Jon Gable, I'm going to start with you. For those of you who may not know, I moderated a similar panel here 2 years ago on also bipartisanship and unity and the situation at the time. And so I was wondering if you could set the scene a little bit for us. Since I spoke to you 2 years ago, have political divides worsened since that time period? Have they gotten even deeper? And consequently, do you find that our elections, or are you worried that our future elections are going to constantly be between two extremes?
Yeah, it's interesting because 2 years ago you asked something similar, and what was interesting because we started All Sides, really first prototypes like 10 years ago or more than that. And it used to be that I'd go around and explain to people how society and technology is dividing us and how it's a problem. And 10 or 11 years ago, people were like, yeah, sure, whatever. And so I'd have a 30-minute meeting. I'd spend 25 minutes showing them data and proof that this is becoming a bigger and bigger problem. Now, if I spend more than 25 or 30 seconds, they get bored with me. It's obvious. And I like to point out that's actually good news, because if you're an addict, for example, the first stage is recognizing there's a problem. So we got through stage one, gang. We know there's a problem. That's a good thing. In terms of what's changed the last 2 years, I don't think it's gotten necessarily worse. It's all kind of pretty as low as it goes, up and down a little bit. But what is interesting is that there's more action I'm seeing of people actually doing stuff. One thing that is true, I'd say there are two differences. One is There's a more universal disgust with the current situation. There is a very palatable public, surveys show this, schools show this, you probably see this in classrooms, that they're just like, okay, something's wrong here, we need to do something better. And the second thing that's different is that it used to be people just did kind of the brain dead first thing they thought of. Now people are beginning to get a little bit more serious about really addressing the situation. CNN tried to be a little bit more center for the debate that they hosted. Newsweek used to be very biased. Now it's a little bit more a combination of things. There are new press media organizations. They're actually making money. The ones that are going more extreme aren't doing better. The ones that are actually doing a little bit more center, the new ones like the Free Press and others, are actually doing quite well. We're doing quite well. We're not spending that much money either. So you have this change in media and other places, because it's not just in news, it's in boardrooms, it's in classrooms, that they're beginning to not just do the, oh, minister of truth, believe me when I tell you this because I am correct, that they're realizing it's a more nuanced problem than that. And those are good changes.
Oh, that's hopeful. So you're saying there's a chance.
Things get bad before they get better. I mean, if you go back to the printing press, we think of the Enlightenment and all these wonderful things, but the first 100 years were hell as people were reading and arguing and getting in dangerous warfare. But eventually we learned how to get through that and get the advantages of printed media. And I think it's the same thing for us now with the new technology, and AI in particular is getting people to pay attention as well. We make a lot of missteps, but then we can learn how to take advantage of these new things we have.
Amazing. General Clark, I'd like to turn it to you. Your organization focuses on increasing understanding and common ground to bridge these partisan divides and stop the gridlock that we're facing. And this is a general question, but I'm curious how your thoughts on how we can bring our political leaders and communities together, but more specifically, if there are any best practices you're seeing that really work.
So what I learned about politics, I ran, and then somebody explained it to me after I'd already run and not been elected. They said, look, there's 3 rules. Define yourself, define your opponent, and react quickly to any attack. Well, of course, if you're the same as your opponent, why would anyone vote for you versus him? So the essence of politics is to create division. Now the thing is, you have to have an understanding in the citizenry that division it's superficial, or what holds us together is more powerful than what divides us. And so what we decided we would do is we'd bring post-partisan politicians out and put them on, in town hall meetings and college classrooms and let them explain, yeah, I was a Democrat, I was a Republican, but honestly, here's the truth. Except here's the problem. We did this in the Army, it works really great in the Army, but there are no post-partisan politicians, especially in the Republican Party. They're always connected, it's their identity, their relationships, their friends. So we decided we would try to take it down a level, bring people together who aren't in politics, just ordinary citizens, put them in challenging communications exercises, and let African Americans work with whites and Northerners with Southerners and Christians work with Muslims, and people that had no way of knowing each other before, they suddenly find they've got a lot in common. And what I learned in the Army is if you want to have a great unit, you have to have great soldiers. You'll always find smart people at the top. If you want a great country, it has to start with a great electorate.
Yeah.
And so what we're trying to do is work the electorate. Now, I need some help, okay? I'm only doing 30 people a year. I'm not going to change America much at 30 people a year, but if you all would join in with us, we can make a difference. People make a difference, and people vote for the kind of people that they want in government. Once you get people that understand, well, and that's so different from me, they reject the extremes. And I think this is what you're seeing, John. You know, America moves in 40 to 50-year historical cycles. We're at the end of the age of Reagan. It's going to be this election, next election. People that care about each other. It's going to move back toward the progressive era. And what we have to have is a citizenry that understands it, respects the people who are running for office, but people running for office have to understand the boundaries with which they can approach the public. Right now, we got some people that don't appreciate those boundaries.
Nope. Jon, I'm hoping you could follow up on that a little bit and harp on media. Sorry, yes, Jon, Gallup Jon.
Yes.
To talk about the media, the role of media, the role that media has played in furthering these divides. Sorry, again, to the media. I think I'm the media too, we're all the media, anyway. But what is the role that they have played? How significant has it been? And what would incentivize the media to shift toward the center? I mean, Jon Gable, you mentioned it a little bit that we're already starting to see this shift, but how do you see it from your seat?
Well, one is, for this country to be strong, I think we need journalism. We need journalism that we can trust. But one of the challenges that we see, and we've been monitoring confidence in many institutions over the past 50 years, and we've seen a very concerning trend among media where we've just seen a complete free fall in confidence and trust in the media. We were lucky enough to do a project with the Knight Foundation where we wanted to dive in to say exactly what is wrong. And what we found is we said, do you think that there's any kind of bias that exists in the media? We found that there was a majority of Americans that said the most extreme answer, which was, yeah, I think there's a lot of bias that exists in the media. And that's up 10 points from when we started in 2017. When we also asked them, do you think that when you're writing to people, when you have your audience in mind, do you think that those journalists actually care about the issues that affect them? And we found that a majority said no. And the worst one, this was 50% said they think that journalists are actually trying to intentionally mislead their readers. So this is a massive concern. But there is hope. There is hope. Because when we ask people about what role do you think that media could play in actually affecting change amongst the partisan divide that exists in this country, 49% say, I think media can play a massive role. And when we ask them about the various issues about, well, what is it that they actually need to do? They said one is just add in diverse viewpoints when you're doing your reporting. The second thing is they said diversify your newsrooms. And the last one, and I think this is a remarkable sort of admission from the American public because we posited the two against each other, which is for us to consume this information and to get better at it, is it the responsibility of the media or the readers to get better? And fascinatingly enough, it was a majority of respondents that said, actually, it's on the reader that needs to be paying attention and know what it is that they should be trusting and what it is they shouldn't be trusting. So we are in a tough spot when it comes to journalism, but I think there is a little bit of hope in terms of what we see in our data.
Mm-hmm. Anna, you're also in the media world, so actually I'm going to ask you a bit of a two-parter. I think if you could just follow on to that question, your views as well. Having a media brand and the reactions that you're seeing, do you find that there is a desire for more objective, fair, central news that's in the center or neutral? But also if you could talk about the younger generation. You are also a professor, you've done a lot with the younger generation. How do you find they are reacting to political divides in your experience? Are they falling into the traps or are they rejecting it? And what would you recommend we all do to get the younger generation to embrace messages of bipartisanship and unity?
So I have so much to react on what Jon said. And Jon and I have lots of these kind of conversations, and he comes back with very interesting data. I would say, first of all, I feel like I need to defend the media business and journalism. And I would say that in this day and age, we conflate media companies and journalism, the practice of journalism sometimes, because we see major social media companies as the biggest sort of production and distributors of information. And this is where Jon Gable can come in with his company as well. What we need is more literacy. We need people to be able to understand the difference between what they read and how they consume it. And all of these obviously falls on the reader. I thought that was the most important data point that you shared, Jon. But let me also say this. Something shifted fundamentally. So I started my media company 20 years ago, and it was a fundamentally different time. It was right around the same time as Twitter and Facebook were being born, and the media business was in this disarray, right? It was even it was a bigger transition than we're seeing right now, because it was the moment where things completely shifted in the tech world. And we went from having this normative approach to creating once and distributing a million times to now catering to an audience of one. And that changed not just the business, but also how we create and distribute information and news. And what it did, that kind of efficiency was actually not very good for us, because now the algorithm is way too good at predicting what we want, our biases. So even when we talk about, going back to the youth, the kids are all right. They figured it out. We have to figure out where they're getting their information. Because if they're not reading the stuff that is coming out of normative media companies or your mass media companies, and they're getting all their information on TikTok, and they need their information to be 15 seconds, very smart, very funny, otherwise they're not engaging, then we need to figure out as a business how to engage that generation. And they're all right. They're actually much more civil than their parents. But we have to figure out what that really means in real terms. And I was thinking about this, and I'll end here, but to have shared values, you need to have shared experiences. And going back to that efficiency model, how we consume information and news is how we consume mass cultural stuff. So I doubt if I asked a question here about a famous show that there would be more than maybe a third of the room that watches that show. You might know about it, but you may not have watched it. So we don't have this moment where back in the day, I would say, we all came to the same front page news. We all watched the same nightly shows. We all shared this cultural experience. The only thing I can think of as a shared cultural experience right now is maybe sports. And that's why they're getting the greatest numbers of all the media out there. So that's sort of where I would begin. It sounds very trite maybe, or simple and cliche, but let's start with breaking bread together and figuring out how to have more shared experiences.
Now you know why I dance around in a Putin costume.
Exactly.
Just to get people to care about this stuff.
Exactly.
General, I want to turn back to you. It sometimes just feels as though we're in a broken system, in Washington in particular, on partisanship and political divide. And I know that behind the scenes, it's not always like that, but it often feels like partisanship is getting in the way of real solutions. What are you seeing in terms of, you already mentioned how a candidate sometimes benefits from being more extreme in an election, for example. What do they need to see from the citizens in order to change their behavior?
I think the citizens have to be willing to speak up against candidates who are too extreme. And so you've got to have, we have new tools for communication, as we're all talking about, with the internet and social media. Got to speak up. You know, in the past, citizens have been, they've been silenced. From the yellow press on, from radio, from television. If you were just out there as an ordinary citizen, you had almost no voice unless you were notable in the community. But today, you can have a voice. Now, if citizens will speak up and say we reject this kind of talk, and if they speak up with enough volume and enough determination, they can have an impact on it. But it does run in a cycle. And as Jon was saying, people are getting tired of this, and we have to digest what social media meant. We had a representative democracy, and suddenly social media enabled everybody to become an expert. Everybody understood everything about it because it's right there on TikTok. And so we have to figure out, okay, what does that do to the democracy, and how do we work with it? But I think, you know, at balance, the American people, this culture, it's still a great culture. And even though Frank Luntz, the pollster, told me before the 2022 election that 40% of the American people, they didn't care about bipartisanship. They just wanted effective government. Well, that's a very dangerous figure, because that's how Mussolini got the trains to run on time in Italy. If you don't care about the process of government, you just want to surrender it to somebody who says, I know how to do it, I'll do it myself, you're going to have the end of this democracy. So I think we're going through a learning period right now with social media, but I think the American people have an innate sense of decency, of fair play, even on the sporting field, or maybe that's the culture that does it. You know, you can tell when something's It's a foul ball. It's wrong. And the majority will speak out on this. So I think we're going to see in this election a movement back to the left from what was the era of Reagan. I think Joe Biden started it with trying to build the economy from the bottom up and the middle out. Trickle down should be over. It's still an issue in this election, but I think when it moves, people will start to feel a greater sense of commitment. We need to reestablish in this country a sense of public service. We had it after World War II. We had it until Vietnam, really. And then we gave it up. We got into the volunteer force. People didn't any longer and increasingly don't feel a responsibility for the country as a whole. And so it starts with us, but also our political leaders. We should be preaching the virtues of public service. And when we don't, we're making a mistake that's going to hurt all of us.
I agree with you. It's a very slippery slope. You know, there's a lot of focus on the citizenry and the broader public. And so, Jon, I'm hoping you could give everybody the priceless advice you gave me 2 years ago on stage as well. I had asked you, not to make you repeat everything, but I had asked you how to have civil discourse with someone who is perhaps across a different political, of a different political background, but that, it could just be anybody with whom you vehemently disagree. It could be your crazy uncle at Thanksgiving. Not that I have one, we all have one. So you gave me priceless advice that I use over and over again and that I teach for my students as well. So could you please share the advice on how to have civil discourse?
I don't remember exactly what I said, but it always begins with truly listening first to understand the other person. There's a lot of talk you hear everywhere, like, they don't hear me. Well, you kind of have to earn the right to be heard, and we do that by really listening to the other person. And not to listen to tell them why they're wrong or tell them why, like a debate, to listen to really understand even beyond the words they're saying. And when that happens, then they are fascinated in you as well. Curiosity is a wonderful trait to have. And to your point about the citizenry, this is actually the opportunity we have with modern technology.
Right.
I don't think you can go back to the Walter Cronkite days. And actually before the Walter Cronkite, it was more dispersed. Back in the 1770s, you had everybody getting information from different places.
Right.
The opportunity we have with our technology and our psychology is that we are wired to connect. And we actually have technology that makes it easy for small groups to do this over and over again. And we've been testing at all sides with literally thousands of people in small groups of 6, following their own guides, working with each other, and they're completely different. Opposite sides, opposite geographically, different ages, perspective, you name it. And 88 to 92% of them, depending on which pilot you're talking about, want to do it again. And we can even measure afterwards that they've changed their attitudes about a different idea and a different person, that they're more open to that. And Vetzer Institute did something with this. They actually went back 2 months later and saw that that change in attitude had remained. Mm-hmm. You're talking about empowering the public. We can do that, but not in a broadcasting way, do this, but in a connective way when we make that possible. I mean, junk food, junk news will always be popular. I love Mountain Dew and Snickers bars, but there's also Whole Foods and Trader Joe's and healthier alternatives. And we just need to provide that to our nation and to other democracies around the world. And making that possible gives everybody the power to choose better leaders.
Wonderful. All right. Well, we have a minute left, so I'll ask. I'm running out of time, and I don't want to be, not invited back. Anna, if you could just comment on how the international world views us, given these political divides.
I'll do that
in 30 seconds.
The whole world in 30 seconds.
The whole world. I think what happens when there's a deficit in leadership or when other nations don't feel like they can count on you, they look for alternatives. And what we see, especially with Europe, who's very nervous right now with what's happening with our election, you see that they've already started looking for Plan B and Plan C, and it would be, as the UNGA is happening right now, we were one of the architects of the UN. It would be a shame to see the United States kind of fall from that leadership level.
Yes.
And I'll stop there.
And Jon, yours actually ends perfectly with you. If you could, based on the polling you're seeing, if you're seeing that divisions might be ending soon, these political divisions, that there's a desire to end these political divisions soon.
Well, first, I think we have to ask the question on, are we more politically divided? And we did an analysis. We looked back over the past 20 years. We looked at 24 different issues, things like gay marriage, marijuana. We even asked about attitudes toward Cuba. And what we found is that most of those issues, we do see a double-digit increase in the divide that Republicans and Democrats see on those issues. The second one is, do we perceive that there's more of a divide? So today on Gallup.com, we came out with a new study. We've been studying this one for about 25 years, and we asked people, do you think that we're more united or more divided? Now, typically it's a majority that thinks that we're divided, but today it's a new record at 80%. And if you look at this globally, Pew did a fascinating study where they asked about whether or not they thought that there was increasing political tensions within the countries. And of these 19, America was second. So this idea that we are politically divided is true in these three different lenses. And if you said, why do you think this is taking place? And I think General Clark touched on this perfectly. I think one of the challenges right now is it's so hard to govern. And there are a lot of individuals that rather than actually govern, what they've done is leaned into, again, exactly what General Clark said, is said, look at the flaws of somebody else, not actually my ability to govern. And I think that's one of the greatest challenges that we face. By the way, and I'll just finish on this one, but you can see that lack of leadership even in companies. Last year, more CEOs resigned than they have over the past 20 to 25 years because it's so multidimensional at the criticisms that's facing all these leaders that it's just getting tougher and tougher to actually do good governance.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, thank you to our panel. We're out of time. I appreciate all the insight. It's very timely. Thank you.
Great job. Thank you.